Good morning. Our prelude today is number 1008 from the Teal Book, When Our Heart is in a Holy Place.
Hello and welcome to First Unitarian Church of Orlando. I'm Linnea Nelson and I am part of the worship team here. Love is our greatest purpose. These words by J. Abernathy Jr. sum up for me a lot of what being part of a UU community is all about. We affirm that love is our greatest purpose. Accepting one another is the truest form of faithful living. The search for truth is our constant star. We pledge our hearts, minds, and hands to challenge injustice with courage, to find hope in times of fear, and to live out our Unitarian Universalist values every day as a beloved community. Thus do we covenant with each other and with all that is sacred in life. For more information about our congregation, go to orlandouu.org or email WelcomeTeam@orlandouu.org. Now, after service today, we'll gather for fellowship to chat. The Zoom link is in the newsletter and shown here. One of the breakout rooms is the Welcome Center, a great place for new friends to find out more about us. We'll repeat this slide at the end of worship, so all are welcome. And in the Delta safety news today, we are sorry that we were unable to welcome Reverend Margalie Belizaire in person yesterday, but safety for all suggested we wait. But Reverend Margalie, please know that you are welcomed with distanced open arms. Also, the folk ensemble will once again begin meeting on Zoom. But welcome home is the theme for the new 2021-22 year at 1U. One way that welcome can be visible and widely shared is with new name tags. The timing of this project seems perfect after so many months of COVID-related restrictions that kept the congregation from meeting in person. We changed the campus to make it more welcoming, and now we can do the same with new name tags. Look for a link in the newsletter and you'll find it in the comments here. In addition to adding pronouns, the name tags will be larger with first names more prominent and will reflect the newest 1U logo. Now these name tags are being offered at no cost. If you order before August 15th, it's easy. Look in the newsletter and in the comments here for the link to order. And friends, I'm so missing all of you. And that is another reason that I give to the financial treasures of this congregation. Whether we are online or in person, we are a caring community. All the behind the scenes work that happens, even when we are online, is important to support. So if you'd like to make an offering to support the many ministries of this congregation, go to orlandouu.org and click the donate button in the upper right corner. Send a text or send a check. And another way we practice generosity is the sharing the plate with a community partner. And in August, that's the Zebra Coalition. The Zebra Coalition is a network of organizations which provide services to lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, and all youth, ages 13 to 24. The coalition assists young people facing homelessness, bullying, isolation from their families, and physical, sexual, and drug abuse with individualized programs to guide them to recovery and stability. As we welcome Reverend Margalie Belizaire to the pulpit today, let us be grateful and uplifted to be in worship together.
Good morning. I'm Rhonda Rodriguez, a member of the worship team here at 1U. We were excited to have so many questions submitted for today's Q&A with Reverend Margalie. There was no way to include them all. So I would like to introduce today's session by sharing Margalie's biography, which will hopefully answer some of the questions that we regretfully could not put on the final list. Reverend Margalie was most recently the assistant minister at First Unitarian Church in Rochester, New York, a congregation of 700 people. She also served as a ministerial intern at the Unitarian Church in Westport, Connecticut, worked part-time as a chaplain at St. Francis Hospital in Hartford, Connecticut, and was a learning fellow with the Church of the Larger Fellowship. Reverend Margalie earned her Master's of Divinity degree from Meadville Lombard Theological School in 2020. Before turning to ministry, Reverend Margalie earned a Master of Science in Administration following her Bachelor of Arts in Psychology. She has a vast amount of experience in nonprofit management and administration. She was a social services administrator who worked with people with various marginalized identities, including those with developmental disabilities, domestic violence victims, and children placed in foster care. She also worked as a volunteer with the Immigration Community Support Network in New Haven, Connecticut, and the New Haven Leon Sister City Project. Reverend Margalie spent 3 years in Zambia, Africa, as a volunteer project developer for Habitat for Humanity International. Reverend Margalie enjoys planning, leading, and co-leading engaging and creative worship services, and she is excited about nurturing and growing lay leadership. She has an open and warm smile and a broad and friendly laugh. She notes, "I have 3 solid values that have, together, served as a compass for me during most of my life, and I hope will be at the center of my ministry. They are connection, authenticity, and risk-taking."
Good morning. We're the Nelson Vassal family. This is Joan, and I'm Yvonne. Unitarian Universalists light a chalice at the beginning of worship to set aside this time as sacred. Please join us as we say these familiar words.
In the light
Light
of truth and in the warmth of love, we gather to seek, to sustain, and to share.
Today we're reading All Are Welcome by Alexander Penfold and Suzanne Kaufman. Pencils sharpened in their case, bells are ringing, let's make haste. School's beginning, dreams to chase, all are welcome here. No matter how you start your day, what you wear when you play, or if you come from far away, all are welcome here. In our classrooms, safe and sound, fears are lost and hope is found. Raise your hand, we'll go around. All are welcome here. Gather now, let's take part. We'll play music, we'll make art. We'll share stories from the heart. All are welcome here. Time for lunch, what a spread, a dozen different kinds of bread. Pass it round till we're all fed. All are welcome here. Open doors, rush outside. We will swing, we will slide. We'll have fun side by side. All are welcome here. We're part of a community. Our strength is our diversity, a shelter from adversity. All are welcome here. We will learn from each other. Special talents we'll uncover. There's a big world to discover. All are welcome here. So much to learn, so much to do, and when the busy day is through, can't wait to come back, start anew. All are welcome here. Head for home to get some rest and greet tomorrow, ready and fresh. Our time together is the best. All are welcome here. You have a place here. You have a space here. You are welcome here. Welcome.
Today's anthem is Made Me a Palette. It's an early 20th century folk song about hospitality. We have some new words penned by Barbara Howe, and it's going to be performed by the combined talents of the Chalice Choir, the Folk Ensemble, and the MC. The song is still about welcoming a stranger into your home and creating a safe place of love and family.
I now invite you into a moment of meditation and prayer. Make yourself as comfortable as you can, maybe 5% more comfortable than you are right now. And let's take some deep breaths together. And as you breathe deeply and exhale, imagine yourself moving from the ordinary, mundane things of life to the extraordinary, to the sacred. Ground yourself into this moment. Feel the breath. Feel the air you're breathing in and what you're exhaling. Feel yourself into this present moment together. And let's take one more deep breath together. And exhale. And now resume your regular way of breathing. Remembering that this breathing in and out that we do several times a minute is life itself. This breathing in and out that many of us take for granted is our bodies breathing us, taking care of us. And as we breathe in and out, let's make space for the joys and the sorrows of this community, of the larger community. Where COVID continues to haunt us, where fires and floods, and this is all in addition to the everyday suffering of this world. And among all of those sufferings, there is also cause for celebration. And here in this community, at First Unitarian Church of Orlando, we are celebrating our coming together. This new configuration of one you, as you and I commit to doing ministry together. Let us go into this with our eyes open, with our hearts full of love. Let us listen to one another. Let us make space for one another. Let us understand that we are coming together from different points of views and points of views as Unitarian Universalists that are very similar. Let us make space for grace and kindness to enter whenever we mess up, because we will. Let us be open and have the courage to build together, to play together, to discuss together, to have the difficult conversations and the lovely conversations. May we be so blessed. May we be so kind. May we be so loving.
Voice still and small, deep inside all, I hear you call, singing. In dark and rain, sorrow and pain, still will remain, singing. Calming my fears, quenching my tears, through all the years, singing.
Welcome, Reverend Margalie. We are so thrilled and excited to pick up on your journey. We've heard a bit about what brought you this far, and in that learning process, we had sent out an opportunity for people to submit questions, and so I have some of those questions they've submitted to learn a little bit more, and so I guess we'll jump right in.
Okay.
First question is pretty broad, but an important one. It is, tell us more about your theology.
Yeah, I borrowed this phrase from a mentor, and I see myself as agnostic with mystical tendencies, or a humanist with mystical tendencies. And basically, what I mean by that is the important thing for me in theology is not whether or not there is the existence of a God or not. There's mystical stuff. There are things that we don't know and can't know happening around us all the time. And all we're trying to do in this life, I believe, is make meaning out of the things that are going on around us, in us, with us. And the important piece for me in all of this is connection, how we connect with one another, how we make space for one another. Because I do think that when we make that space, when we can fully make space for other people to show up, that is actually where the holy happen. That's where the sacred happens. I know that agnostic humanist, there is such an overemphasis on whether God exists or God does not exist. I really don't think that matters. And I think putting so much emphasis on that takes away from what we can actually do for one another, how we can really create one another, how we can affirm one another. We give life to one another all the time, but on the other side of that, we take life away from one another too, when we either consciously or unconsciously withhold things for one another that they need. So yeah, I think, I go straight to God when I think of theology, but I don't think that really is the full important. No.
What a beautiful answer to that big question. The next one is, if you tell us a little bit, and I hear it in that response, your connection to Unitarian Universalism.
Oh, my connection to Unitarian Universalism. I think I remember the first time I entered a Unitarian Universalist congregation, and that was in Cleveland, Ohio. And really, I went there after a friend kept prompting me to go and said, "Hey, that's where, you'll find your people there." And I was like, "Oh, okay, yeah." And I'm sure many of us, many of you have that, right? And I didn't. It took almost a year, if not longer, for me to finally show up at a place of worship for Unitarian Universalists, a place of worship. And when I got there, the minister happened to be preaching on what it meant to be a Unitarian Universalist. And I was sitting there going, wow, making the inclusivity of it all, to me, that's the draw. Like what we don't always get it right, but that is the aspiration, right? To be inclusive, to make room for other people, which, as you said, I mentioned a little bit in my first answer. But I think that's what's special. That's what's worthy about Unitarian Universalism, the aspiration to be inclusive. In addition to that, we're process theologians. We're always changing as we get new information, right? As we come to understand something better, we change with it, or at least that is our aspiration. There are things we don't know right now that we'll come to know later, or that will become clearer later. And as those things happen, we grow, we change with it, and we're always in process. And I think that is, those are probably the two primary things for me when it comes to Unitarian Universalism. That's the draw.
Well, what's interesting is the follow-up to that question is what parts of what are the best parts of being a UU, and what are the hardest parts? And in some ways that description is both, right? It's both the best part and the hardest, because it is always changing.
Yes, I have a friend who lives in Tallahassee who sent me a text recently saying, "Hey, you were about to start in Orlando," and I said yes, and she said there's a new minister starting also in Tallahassee, and I'm like, "Oh, you're keeping tabs on Unitarian Universalists?" She said, "Yeah, I am." She's like, "I've been going to services for the last month or so." She's like, "I don't know yet how I feel about it." And I said, it can be an acquired taste, and what I meant by that is, for me, there's that freedom that also it's attached with a responsibility, right? But there's that freedom that comes with being able to just explore, to really fully, if one takes advantage of being a UU, you have such an opportunity to really explore things of a spiritual nature without feeling like, oh my gosh, like certain denominations put restrictions on certain things. But we don't here. We actually encourage you to really think and make sense of spirituality, of faith, of all of those things, right? And so that's, to me, that is both, it feels really good, but there's also like this fear here. So you mean it's all up to me in a way to work this out, but it really, that can feel scary, but we are doing this in community, right? So, you're not fully doing it alone. But there is that piece where when, for example, Christians will say, if you do this, you go to heaven. If you don't do this, you go here, there. But with Unitarian Universalism, we're not saying that. We're saying the here and now. This is where you do the work. This is where it's happening. This is and so on. So that there's such freedom in this, but also a little daunting, a little scary. So, yeah.
Yeah, that responsibility piece. So this is a very common question that folks ask, and that is, can you tell us about your favorite book, or favorite movie, or favorite music? I personally struggle with that question because I never settle on a favorite for a long time. So I toss it to you.
Yeah. So when, as you were asking the question, certain books, a book popped in my head. And when you asked about the movie, a movie popped in my head. And the movie I knew for sure. The book, I'm not surprised. I didn't realize that book, I still considered that book my favorite. But Alice Walker, The Temple of My Familiar, is definitely a favorite. For me, it felt like it changed how I read once, because it was given to me years before. I put it aside, and then I picked it up years later, and then all of a sudden it was like, whoa, and I couldn't put it down, and it changed how I engage reading. And favorite movie, I feel like that's always been a favorite, and it hasn't been replaced yet. Ordinary People. Yeah, I think what I like about that, what I love about that movie, it is a sad movie, but it just, the vulnerability that is represented in that movie, and also how life experiences shape us. For me, it's like that's the key thing. And sometimes if certain things don't happen to us, we never get to become who we are, or who we are is never fully revealed to us or to others. So, that is my favorite movie. And what were the other favorites?
Music? Do you have a favorite style of music, or a favorite musician?
It seems Tracy Chapman has always been with me. I feel like since I was in my 20s, since it first came out, she's always been with me. So I guess if I had to choose a favorite singer, it would be Tracy Chapman. But I love a variety of music. I think maybe it's because I've been so many places. I've been exposed to so many types of music. I like world music. I love pop. I love rock. I love, but I think for me, the important part in the music, really the words. That's the important piece. And sometimes when I just feel like dancing, then the beats, so, but for the most part, it's the words. So.
I can see that. I've always thought Tracy Chapman was a poet that brought her poetry to music. Right. So this is another change question, because you talked about the books that you feel, changed things for you. This is a question about events in society, any kind of large societal events that you feel changed your life. And similarly, any kind of advancements, from a broader outside perspective, things that may have made a significant impact to change things.
Yeah, I think, teenage years, I'm going back to my teenage years here, but I think many of you may already know that I grew up in Miami, and I remember the riots of the 80s, and I was a kid when it happened, and I I think that was one of the, it was one of the biggest riots since the 60s, I believe, that happened in the US. But what caught my attention, I remember, we lived far enough away from it where we weren't directly impacted, but I remember on the news how the news media was referring to the folks who were just really burning down their neighborhoods, their homes, the businesses there, and so on, and saying, calling them stupid and, why would they do that, or barbaric, or a number of those things. It never quite made sense to me to refer to them as that, because I saw it as people who felt desperate. And, if you remember, it was following, I'm forgetting his name right now. It was following the shooting of a Black man who was riding a motorcycle, and somewhere in there, I'm not sure what happened between him and the police, but he was killed. He had no criminal records or anything like that. Not that other shooting hadn't happened before, but I think the fact that it happened to him, I hope his name comes to me as we speak. I think it took the community, it hit the community really hard. And I just couldn't understand why they were being referred to as that, because to me, it made sense that people who had no other way of having their needs met, of having their rightful anger satisfied, it made sense to do that. And it's like, what? And then, I think the piece was, why were they destroying their own community? Where else were they going to destroy? Because if they went to some other community to destroy, the police would have surely killed them. So I think it was an act of survival, not to go, say, to the North Miami Beach communities, Adventura community. If any of you have been to Miami, you probably know those areas. Those were at least the wealthy, more expensive areas. For them to go to those areas and try to burn down businesses and so on, they surely would have met their death. So and it made me later, as I became a young adult and got introduced to Frantz Fanon, and he speaks exactly about that phenomenon, that frustration that, people need a way, people need to feel heard. And I think that was this group of people's way of wanting to be heard, because nothing else they did they feel heard, not in the way they wanted to be heard anyway, because anything negative, of course, was a sign to them. But yeah, and I feel like that changed a lot for me. That riot, with it happening, with the way the news was reporting it, and seeing the hopelessness and helplessness of the act of rioting, of destroying businesses in your own neighborhood, and what that meant for them. Yeah. So I think that was probably the first major incident that I can think of that really kind of, I guess in a way, opened my eyes to how Black skin was viewed, and how and the hopelessness and helplessness of that act. So yeah.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. Thank you for sharing that, and that framing of. I had not thought about framing the results of that righteous anger, as you said, in being what seems like turned on your own community, but as you say, where else are you going to take it?
Yeah.
Thank you. Hey, this is changing a little bit, changing gears a little bit. So we're going to look a little closer at our own congregation. So this question says, one of our goals as a congregation is to integrate children and youth more fully into our Sunday services. So the question is, what have you seen in church settings that you found really effective, or what are your thoughts? What are you thinking about that, and knowing that this is a goal of ours?
Yes. What have I seen? I do. And looking at the goals, and I have looked at them, and that's not only when you look at the little steps. That's the first one that's listed, that brought joy to my heart to see that was the first one listed. What I have seen. So, well, first of all, I think in order for us to continue as a denomination, right, we need to be able to engage the youth. We need to be able to bring the children in and keep them, right? Because I think for our denomination, not just us, other denominations too, once the children get to a certain age, they leave, right? So what I have seen done is where the children are fully incorporated in the service. For example, and maybe that's already done at 1U. I don't know yet. As I get to know you better, I will learn that. But for example, one service a month is a multi-generational service, where the children are part of the service from beginning to end, and making sure that it is intergenerational, not just the children, middle age, youth, young adults, everybody is incorporated, is part of that service. And to me, it is a way of introducing the adult church setting to children, because usually in most of our congregations, the children come in, and then sometimes they're not part of the service at all. But for some of our congregations, after time of all ages, they leave and go to their own congregations where they are only with their friends, right? And then all of a sudden they get to a certain age, we're like, okay, so you now are part of the regular church, and you're going to start attending there. So I think it's a bit jarring for them. Mm-hmm. And the other thing also is, I think sometimes it might feel like there's a disconnect between what they're learning in children's RE and what all of a sudden they're in the regular church and what they're learning or seeing there. So maybe the things we don't talk about certain things as much in regular church as in children's church. So I would like to see more services where the children are a part of the larger church. And I know sometimes one of the reasons we want to separate it is, attention span for children is much shorter, and we don't want them to be bored. And then sometimes we don't want to be disturbed by the noises they make when they're in larger church. So, what's all this noise? But I think that that's part of us sharing space, right? Part of us sharing space together, making space for one another. And I think it's needed. I think we need to, and I think it's okay to be a little bored. I mean, I'd say it's part of, I think, the training anyway to become an adult. Every second of the day as an adult, you don't have someone trying to entertain you, trying to meet your needs. We get bored, right? So I think even
what a great observation,
right? Right. So I think even if in the service, on this particular day or this particular service, the children are bored, I don't think that will kill them or harm them in any way. I think it's part of the training. So I do think having them in the and part of regular church more often than not, I think is one way to do that. And there are other ways, but this is not a 3-hour interview, so
well, and we'll have a lot of time to explore.
Right.
So actually kind of a similar vein in terms of adult religious enrichment and spiritual growth. Your thoughts on that?
Yes, I think adult religious education could use some mirroring of children's religious education, right? Because I feel like in children RE, we are always teaching something, you know, we're teaching about something. And I think in adult religious education, we could focus a little bit more on that. For example, maybe we are a faith that's open to any denomination, right? Maybe having, and again, maybe that's done already, but maybe have a series of on different denominations, you know, maybe once a month. What do I don't know, Catholics believe, and you know, what are the important holidays, Hindus, and so on. And there could also be a series on just the different ways to be a social justice activist, bringing folks in to speak specifically to their experience and hows, you know, how to type thing. And I think that's the part I mean about mirroring children RE. I think children RE has an how-to component to it that adult RE doesn't necessarily have. Because I do find a lot of times people will, because I think we feel that as adults, we kind of know the how-to. But I don't know if that's necessarily true. You know, so I really think like looking at what are, for 1U, looking at what are the needs of the adults there, and what will challenge folks, and what is it that folks are fully interested in learning about, right? So I think the things that people are already interested in learning about, a lot of people will come. But I also think there are folks who want to be challenged a little bit about, like, you know what, I don't know that I ever thought of it this way. You know, so I think just kind of, I would like to fully examine what the needs are and what would meet the needs of the folks of 1U.
Great. You know, as an emerging program church, you know, we're kind of in that space between. We are learning about and trying to keep top of mind the concept of shared ministry. And so this question is about what your vision or definition of shared ministry is, and how we could bring that more effectively to our congregation. How will we learn about that together?
Yeah, you know, I think that is the style of ministry that speaks to me. Anyway, I don't think any one person or has all the answers, or any one person's way of doing things is the only way of doing things. And I think in most of our settings, the minister's way of doing worship, for example, is or the sermon is at the center of it, right?
Mhm.
But when I think of shared ministry, and I think of all the different elements, all the different components that makes a worship service, right? And sometimes somebody sitting in there, it's not the sermon that speaks to them, it is the music, right? Somebody else, it is the meditation, the prayer that speaks to them. So all that to say, I think all the different people, all the different pieces have gifts that they're offering in this service and this worship service, and all need to be lifted up. There are days when the sermon is what will shine, and there are days when music ought to be the focus, and there are days when um, and even with the sermon, it's not so many of us have learned so much in life through our experiences, whether spiritual or religious experiences or other experiences. We have all this knowledge that we can impart on one another. And sometimes that will come from the minister, and sometimes it comes from somebody else in the congregation, a group in the congregation. So I see all these voices working together to help in our spiritual growth. So I really the sandwich service where sermons in the middle, the other the condiments all around. So I really would like to see a space where all of it is affirmed, and maybe that's already happening here. I just want to make sure that I'm still learning here.
Well, it's interesting because one of the questions was, what are the essential elements of your worship service? you're just answering that question as if you anticipated by asking it.
Yeah.
What's unique in it? And I think the other part of this question in it, we don't want it to be a spoiler alert answer, but are there going to be some surprises for us? Do you think in terms of your approach to the worship service?
Yeah.
Or have you seen some things in other settings that you said, hey, that looks interesting?
Yeah, I love experimenting with services. I love co-creating creative services. Services that are a little different. So yes, I'm looking forward to doing some of that here at 1U. And as far as elements that are important, I think I look at worship as it's just this little moment in time that we carve to move from the ordinary, mundane, everyday life to the extraordinary, right? So I think this is what I think we hope to do during worship, just kind of like leave the ordinary things to the side for a little bit, and let's just move into the extraordinary, the mystical, the sacred, the holy for a minute. And so everything that happens during that time ought to serve that, elements that are, I really love one of my favorite parts in a service, I guess, is the meditation and prayer piece. I think that's probably one of my favorite part of a service. But the music, I find music in everyday life to be sometimes life-saving. So I can you add that into a religious community, how much that can do for someone. So the music, that element is also very important. I mean, we've had services that's all music, but you haven't had services that's all sermon, right? So that tells us how we see how important music is to us, And then, of course, the sermon as a minister, I have to say that, right? The sermon has to be important, it's where it's a takeaway, a message, and so on. And then, of course, the wrapping it all up, that closing. I also see the entire worship service is sort of like it's an engagement, a communication between the ministerial team and the congregation, even though the ministerial team of that day is the one doing most of the verbalizing. But, I think during the services, things are happening. I think when we do it right, there are responses from the congregation, that conversation I'm talking about. So yeah, I think I guess I did answer it before now. I think all the elements are important, and sometimes depending on the type of day somebody's having, one element is more important for them than another, and that's why I think every element ought to be paid close attention to. They're not condiments to go with a sermon. They are all very important.
What a great way to say it. Yeah. In our mission statement, we obviously touch on spiritual growth, but we also touch on social justice issues. So this is probably something you could answer a year from now a little bit better, since you're just moving to Orlando. But the question was, what are your first impressions, I guess we could say, about a pressing community social justice issue, and how do you think our church should respond and deal with that?
Yeah, I do like how you preface, maybe later I can have a better
that's
answer.
That's a very fair answer.
I think it is fair. Right now, when I think of what I do have an idea about of this community and social justice, is the response to the Pulse shooting from years ago, and how, from what I understand, how all the work and support that the congregation provided to the community and those in need, and opened its doors to the community as needed. So, showing up, that's definitely a way of showing up for social justice. So yeah, I think as I get to be here, ask me this question a year later and let's see where we are.
Very fair.
I'm not saying we'll have another question back service a year from now, although we could. But yeah. So I guess, so that was good to hear about, just how this community responded to the larger community in this really difficult time for the community at large, and specifically for the LGBTQ community of Orlando. So yeah.
Forever changed, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah. So then, flipping to the other side of our mission statement, back to the spiritual growth side. There's these two are kind of connected, and I know one of them you had asked as a kind of a conclusion to our interview process. But so one question was describing effective practices for self-care and tending to healthy boundaries with the congregation. And that sort of ties into what we started our interviews with, our questions with, talking about your theology. And so the question, in your opinion, is what is the difference between theology and spirituality, and those self-care and those spiritual practices that you can share with us?
Okay. So lots there in this question. So if there's something I don't answer,
Yes.
you got to add to it. Theology and spirituality. I think theology is more head, and spirituality is more heart. That's a short answer. And what I mean by that is, I think theology can give us the language to do spirituality. I think it named things for us. And sometimes there are ways we're thinking about something, but we're not quite sure. And then when we tap into theology, we can find the shortcut, the proper. I don't know if proper is the word, but I'll use it as a placeholder. The proper way of seeing a concept, an idea around the divine, around because I mean, theology itself was the study of God type thing. As you use, though, I'll replace God with the divine study of what is. So that alone, I think, tells us that it is head, and spirituality is what we do, I think, with theology. How do we take that language to make meaning? How do we use that language to make practices in our lives that? So I'm going to switch over to self-care and spiritual practices. Self-care. I think we live in a society that prides itself on doing, and less on being. Although we say we want to be, right? But you hear people with pride will say, I worked 60 hours this week. But somebody probably would embarrass you, would say, I only worked 40 this week. So although we say we want to be mindful of self-care, of our practices. So I guess, first of all, I want to encourage all of us to truly be mindful of how we are taking care of ourselves. And I guess the easier way, just drinking enough water. I try to have water with me all the time. I don't. I try to do 2 of these a day. Sometimes I'm successful, sometimes I'm not. And I'm not saying everybody should do water, but we do need to hydrate. So that's something simple as far as self-care, eating right, all of those things. When I think, so I'm not a nutritionist or any of those. I'm a minister. So let me speak to spiritual care. I think taking time to breathe and feel ourselves in the present moment. I think many times we are living either in the past or in the future. Like, oh my gosh, this thing happened yesterday and it's still affecting me now. Or what do I need to do next? I think sometimes just stopping for a minute and taking a couple of breaths. And so just the idea of paying attention to our breath grounds us, because it's something you have to be doing right now. I had a colleague who, because one of the things she does before every meal is just stop and take 3 breaths. It's something that's very simple, right? Very easy. Take 3 breaths and then really pay attention to what's happening when she's taking those breaths. I have another colleague who sets her an alarm to go off at the top of every hour, and then she just stop, and it's just a reminder for her, and she just takes a breath, right? Now, other things that I have found to be, I love being around trees and water, and so I'll find a park, usually when it's not so hot out, at a park. Just go to a park and just kind of maybe sometimes with a book, sometimes without, and just hearing the wind blowing through the trees and just kind of like paying attention to what's around us. And then water is, I find, very soothing. Being around water, I find very soothing. Music, I've mentioned music before. Just so if you'll notice, everything I'm saying is basically taking the time to do something that kind of brings us in the present, I think. I mention those quiet moments a lot. Some people are more motivated by the physical. Sometimes running. This friend of mine says that he happens to be Christian, so running is a spiritual practice for him, because he says it's the only time really when he feels he's really praying just to pray. He'll go running, and then as he's running, he's praying. I'm no runner, but I'm, just kind of like something that is really helpful for him, and he really feels it. He feels that to be a very sacred act, and when he's done, so he not only does he feel physically good, but he feels spiritually relaxed and at peace also. Some people knit, crochet, but I think the whole point around all of that is whatever it is that when you're doing it, try as much as possible to bring yourself to the present moment for a minute. Sometimes we have the luxury of having more than a minute, more than a second. Take advantage of that. But even if it's just for a minute, just kind of take a breath and go, "Ooh, okay. Yeah." And then continue on. Because whatever it is that has us anxious, it's waiting for us right outside of that. So, and sometimes we need to pick it up right away and continue. Sometimes we can let it sit for a minute. So that is my hope, my encouragement to you, my invitation to you to just, whenever possible, even if it's for a second, to just take a moment to ground yourself in your body and feel yourself in the present moment.
Well, that seems like really wonderful advice for us to end our time together. This has just been delightful. I appreciate very much. We all appreciate, and we'll look forward to getting to know even more about you, Reverend Margalie, as you get to know more about us. I said earlier that at the end of this year, when we're all hopefully past the pandemic and all of those issues, roller coaster issues that we've all been dealing with, we know we have our beloved community, and we will continue to grow together, continue to practice the spiritual practices and do our social justice work. And we can now do it with you, our new settled minister. So welcome and thank you.
Thank you. Such a pleasure. Thank you so much. And I look forward to sharing more and hearing more from you and about you.
Likewise.
Come and go We extinguish the flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again.
May we make space to get to know each other, and may learning about one another lead us to deeper connections. Beloveds, worship has ended, and now the service truly begins.
Spirit of life, come unto me. Sing in my heart all the stirrings of compassion. Blow in the wind, rise in the sea, move in the hand, giving life the shape of